He's got a consultant somewhere. This is the worst consultant in politics that thinks he looks good in a bathing suit, right? No, he spends so much time at the beach. And, how do you do that? And, I have a much better body than him. But I'm not really sure that I want to expose it with the sun blaring down, the sand, the surf, the wind, it's not a pretty sight.
That was Donald Trump attacking President Biden's body and saying that he believes he has a much better body than President Biden. This is what Donald Trump was talking about during a speech over the weekend during massive international crises. This is the type of discourse that he believes is important to his base. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. I want to show you two speeches that Donald Trump gave in Iowa over the weekend to just show how dangerous, how disqualifying, how problematic, how utterly bizarre these speeches are that his base just loves and just keeps eating up. And then I want to compare that to what President Biden was saying and doing over the weekend during the same period of time. So in addition to saying that he believes he has a much better body than President Biden, here is Donald Trump attacking the retired military general Mark Milley, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who Donald Trump just recently threatened to execute and on a social media post said to be continued. Play the clip.
And I had a couple of guys like this guy Milley. What a stupid person he is. Milley, no, he's a stupid. Sir, he said to me, it's cheaper to leave the equipment than it is to take it.
And is Donald Trump talking about issues? Is he talking about prescription drug prices? Is he talking about protecting Social Security or education or issues that are important to seniors or students? Is he saying any of that? Absolutely not. Instead, he is saying that he believes Hannibal Lecter was a great actor because he says Hannibal Lecter supports him. Play this clip.
I said, that's Silence of the Lamb. You know what that is? Has anybody seen Silence of the Lambs? Hannibal Lecter, how great an actor was he? You know why I like him? Because he said on television, on one of the, I love Donald Trump, so I love him. I love him. I love him. He said that a long time ago, and once he said that, he was in my camp. I was in his camp. Yeah, I don't care if he was the worst actor. I'd say he was great to me.
Here, Donald Trump says that he believes that China and other authoritarian regimes respect him, and the way he knows that is because they called him sir. Play this clip.
And you wouldn't be having all the problems that you have right now with China. China's become very hostile. They weren't hostile with me. They weren't hostile with me. They called me sir. They don't call him sir.
Next, Donald Trump does an impression of Winston Churchill that he finds amusing, which is just weird. Play the clip.
It wasn't Winston Churchill, let's put it that way. Never have so few done so much for so many. This was not Winston Churchill. He was talking about the Spitfire pilots. You know that? The Spitfires, they knocked the German planes, which were bigger, better, stronger, but the Spitfires were unbelievable by luck or whatever. But they could turn on a screw. These big, strong, powerful planes, they couldn't fight with them. But he said, never have so few done so much for so many. And Biden doesn't talk that way.
Here, after fleeing the jurisdiction of New York after a devastating week at trial in the New York Attorney General's civil fraud case, Donald Trump is spending his time in these speeches that he's giving whining that he is not in front of a jury and saying that he couldn't check a box to demand a jury. Here, play this clip.
These are crooked people. This is election interference. These are very dishonest people. And she has a judge who's a radical left judge, and and I don't get a jury. So even if I had a tough jury, I'd win. But I'm not allowed to have a jury. Nothing to do with checking a box. You know what that did? Or said, oh, the lawyer. No. You can't check a box. There's no box in check. They did it under a Consumer Frauds Act. Can you believe this? Where I did everything right, built this great company, and now they find out that the company's worth much more than the financial statement. And they found out I have what's called a disclaimer clause. It's a little complicated, but not too complicated. There was no fraud. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. And they've been totally discredited, and it's a disgrace that a thing like that can go on.
Okay, first off, Donald Trump has not fared well in front of juries before. So the fact that he's acting like he would do better in front of a jury is just utterly false. For example, in the Manhattan District Attorney felony case, that was in front of a jury. They convicted the Trump organization last year within just a few hours. Same thing in the E. Jean Carroll sexual abuse and defamation federal case, where Donald Trump was too scared to even go before a jury, and he literally fled the jurisdiction. Again, remember, he went to Scotland and Ireland and pretend that he was doing something from business, but he was just too afraid to show up at that federal case. So first and foremost, he would not do well in front of a jury. And second, you could demand a jury trial, but let's just assume for the sake of argument that it wasn't as simple as checking a box. Well, why wouldn't anybody on your legal team, at the very least, make a jury demand? Just make a pleading that says Donald Trump hereby demands a jury trial, and then challenge it. In all of your court cases, you file appeal after appeal, emergency motions to stay this, stay that, emergency orders. You know, you're always seeking all of that. So why not just make the demand for a jury trial and then make it an issue in the case versus just whining about it on the media? But it's because, again, you're not telling the truth. Here, Donald Trump's back to the topic of talking about President Biden at the beach and how he doesn't like to see President Biden with his shirt off. Play the clip.
This consultant thinks it's a good look for him to be at a beach at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I don't think that looks too good, Matt, right? You know, we want somebody that works a little bit like I worked hard. But, you know, we want a working president.
Here, Donald Trump spreading dangerous disinformation about the 2020 election, lying and saying that he won Wisconsin, a state where he lost. He claims that he won, he lost. And just think about that. We're in 2023 right now. And again, not talking about issues to the people there. He's claiming and lying that he won a state that he didn't win in 2020, saying he won Wisconsin while he's in Iowa. Play this clip.
Wisconsin, great place, Wisconsin, too. We actually won Wisconsin. We won Wisconsin. It took them after the election to determine that, you know. Can you imagine that? You actually won Wisconsin. Like it's routine. Oh, well, and when you see some of the other ones that come out, too. But we actually won. But it's a great place. Not their fault. You know, we have a crooked system. Not their fault. They were angry. Everybody was angry. It was terrible.
Here, Donald Trump says he believes that former President Jimmy Carter would have liked him. Play the clip.
I think Jimmy Carter is going to go down as one of the greatest presidents in history by comparison to crooked Joe Biden. I think Jimmy was great. So it's nice. You know, he's pretty old. And he might even say, I really like Trump. He actually used to say, I really like Trump. Then the Democrats got to him, and he changed his tune pretty quickly. But he did. He liked me. But he's the one he's very happy with the job that Joe Biden is doing, which is basically a non-job.
Here, Donald Trump spreads the lie that all of the MAGA Republicans were spreading over the weekend, saying that the United States government under President Biden released $6 billion to Iran, which Iran used to fund Hamas, which they then used in their horrific terrorist attack and declaration of war against Israel, which is utterly false.
They got 5 hostages. We got 5 hostages. Okay, that's the good news. The bad news is, and their hostages were tough, by the way, I have to tell you. That was, okay, let's assume they're doing just fine. But it was 5 for 5. But in addition to that, we agreed to free up $6 billion. And that is an absolute disaster. And I would not be at all surprised if part of that tremendous wealth that they just accumulated went into all of a sudden watching this level of aggression. They didn't have that level of aggression with me. They didn't have it. This would have never happened with me either. You know what wouldn't have happened? Ukraine wouldn't have happened. Taiwan and all this tough talk with Taiwan wouldn't have happened. And what's going on with Israel right now, people were shocked. I wasn't shocked because 2 weeks ago we gave them $6 billion. Think of it. So we get 5, they get 5, but the difference is we have to give $6 billion. $6 billion! Does anyone know what a billion is?
First off, the $6 billion has not been released. It is still in a bank account in Qatar, so it hasn't even been released. Also, it's earmarked purely for humanitarian aid, the same way it was during the Trump administration. It was used and would be used purely for humanitarian aid. Our Treasury Department has control over exactly where it would go, but it hasn't even been released yet at all, so it would be impossible for it to be used. And eventually, when it is used, it will be targeted to go to humanitarian food and medicine by the Treasury Department. It was also used as part of a deal to make sure American hostages could be returned, which is something that's important. Also, it's not United States taxpayer money. It's not money from our Treasury. It's funds that were frozen as part of sanctions against Iran. So let's just stick with the facts, because I think the facts are what's most important, and Donald Trump spreading the lies and conspiracies there. Here, Donald Trump talking about lies and conspiracies. Here he talks about how Democrats support abortions at 9 months or later. Again, completely and utterly false, disgusting, despicable thing to just lie about and just treat people like they're stupid, and to treat women who need control over their reproductive rights and autonomy, and just treating people like they're dumb by saying that 9-month abortions are allowed, which is just false. Play the clip.
And then if it's after the 9th month and the baby is born, you put the baby aside, you discuss with the mother, and if the mother doesn't want the baby, we execute the baby. This is part of their thing. Now think of it.
Here, again, just more bizarre lies. Donald Trump says that when you go to a grocery store to buy food, you need an ID. Play the clip.
It was like that. Face, fingerprints, everything. They had everything. But not for voting. We don't want it for voting. If you buy a loaf of bread, you got to have your ID out. But for voting, you don't. No, it's a horrible thing.
And here Donald Trump brags that the media has low approval because he calls them the enemy of the people and he attacks them. Play the clip.
We will rout the fake news media. They've got to rout them until they do their job properly. You know, they're supposed to be like the police. They're supposed to watch over corruption, but they're more corrupt than anybody there is. And that's why their approval rating, I'm very proud to say, during my time, it was at an all-time high before I got elected because people didn't know them. And now it's at the lowest it's ever been. It's lower than Congress. Can you believe that? I'm extremely pleased to tell you that I was responsible for that. But they have to clean up their act because nobody believes them. That's why their ratings are all going down the tubes. That's why nobody buys any of their stuff. You take a look at CNN, it's got no ratings. Oh, the red light just went off. Okay, turn it on, I'm finished with you. MSNBC is a horror show. It's just an absolute horror show. And people have just lost tremendous respect. Fox is way down too, by the way. 35 points down because people feel they're just not like the old Fox. They're just not like the old Fox, and we all know what that means.
Can we just compare that for a moment to the speech that President Biden or President Biden's Secretary of State gave over the weekend? Here's President Biden stating that the United States stands with Israel. Play the clip.
President
Good afternoon.
Joe Biden.
Today, the people of Israel are under attack, orchestrated by a terrorist organization, Hamas. In this moment of tragedy, I want to say to them and to the world and to terrorists everywhere that the United States stands with Israel. We will not ever fail to have their back. We'll make sure that they have the help their citizens need and they can continue to defend themselves. You know, the world's seen appalling images. Thousands of rockets in the space of hours raining down on Israeli cities. When I got up this morning and started this at 7:30, 8 o'clock, my calls. Hamas terrorists crossing in Israel, killing not only Israeli soldiers, but Israeli civilians. In the street, in their homes, innocent people murdered, wounded, entire families taken hostage by Hamas, just days after Israel marked the holiest of days in the Jewish calendar, is unconscionable. You know, when I spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu this morning, I told him the United States stands with the people of Israel in the face of these terrorist assaults. Israel has the right to defend itself and its people, full stop. There's never justification for terrorist attacks. And my administration's support for Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering.
Here's President Biden warning any outside actor or party that seeks to exploit what's going on in Israel will be held accountable. Play the clip.
Let me say this as clearly as I can. This is not a moment for any party hostile to Israel to exploit these attacks to seek advantage. The world is watching.
Here is Secretary of State Anthony Blinken talking about either people are being tricked by disinformation or probably more likely spreading disinformation on the MAGA Republican side. Here, play the clip.
I just have to ask you to, if you want to respond to what we're hearing from Republicans who are over and over since this happened, using the word appeasement when it comes to Iran and your administration. They criticized the decision to unfreeze $6 billion in Iranian funds. I know and want to state that that money, according to your administration, has not yet been unfrozen. Iran does not yet have it. But the accusation is that Iran's posture, that the U.S., your administration's posture towards Iran has helped contribute to this. I want to give you a chance to respond.
Well, there are two things here. First, with regard to the funds that you mentioned that were were made available to Iran for humanitarian purposes as part of getting Americans back who are being held and detained in Iran. Let's be very clear about this. And it's deeply unfortunate that some are playing politics when so many lives have been lost and Israel remains under attack. The facts are these. No U.S. Taxpayer dollars were involved. These were Iranian resources that Iran had accumulated from the sale of its oil that were stuck in a bank in South Korea. They have had from day one, under our law, under our sanctions, the right to use these monies for humanitarian purposes. They were moved from one account to another in another country to facilitate that use. As of now, not a single dollar has been spent from that account. And again, the account is closely regulated by the U.S. Treasury Department, so it can only be used for things like food, medicine, medical equipment. That's what this is about. And by the way, the previous administration set up a very similar mechanism to enable Iran to use its oil proceeds that were blocked in various places or stuck in various places for humanitarian purposes. So people are either misinformed or they're misinforming. And either way, it's wrong.
And by the way, even Fox had to admit that all these MAGA Republicans were just lying about $6 billion being given to Iran so that it could be funneled to Hamas and that it was taxpayer dollars. Even Fox had to admit that they were platforming lies. And by the way, I think Fox had to admit it because they were previously sued for defamation. So they have to fact check and correct things like that now based on other defamation cases that they're in. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. Play the clip.
The White House has pushed back, as we've reported, on suggestions by Republican presidential candidates that the recent hostage deal that involved the release of $6 billion contributed to the Hamas attack. The $6 billion is still currently held in a Qatari bank account with U.S. Treasury oversight. The money came from Iranian oil sales to South Korea and did not include U.S. taxpayer dollars. NSC spokesperson Adrian Watson said in a statement, quote, "Not a single cent from these funds has been spent yet, and when it is spent, it can only be spent on things like food and medicine for the Iranian people. These funds have absolutely nothing to do with the horrific attacks today, and this is not the time to spread disinformation."
And there you have it, folks. I mean, you can compare and contrast, but I mean, you look at these speeches that Trump's giving in Iowa. I mean, really bizarre, really dangerous. And again, that behavior should not be normalized at all. That's why I wanted to compare that and show you, okay, what's President Biden and his administration doing? So you get a full picture that what Trump's doing just isn't normal. It's not acceptable. And we got to call it out. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit subscribe. We're on our way to 2 million subscribers thanks to your support. Check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Have a great day.
Hey Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.